Hi everyone, welcome back to Poetology. Today's video is a vlog about a series of very short books by Stranger Press. Stranger Press is putting out several series of short contemporary prose from different countries. There's a series from Switzerland, which we're going to talk about today. There are two Korean series, one Japanese series, one Lithuanian series, and more recently a Dutch series. And these are very short books like this that look a bit like poetry pamphlets in format, and they have a series of vignettes or a short story or something like that by 8 different writers. So this is the Swiss series. I decided to start with this one because that's the country I'm from, and I don't know a lot about contemporary Swiss fiction, to be honest. And I like the idea of having two from each of the national languages. So we've got two of them translated from French, two translated from German, two translated from Italian, and two translated from Romansh. I read one of them each day and filmed some shots from my readings so that you can get an idea of where I was and what was going on when I read them. And I will also let you know what I thought about each of them. This is an amazing idea to discover contemporary literature from other countries without putting in a huge investment. You get a snippet into the world of several authors, and they're all translated, which makes it super easy. Many of them have not previously been translated into English, so it's a really great opportunity to get a glimpse into a country's literature. The first one was Unsteady Earth by Marie-Jeanne Urech. And this is a short story about a man called Bartholomé who lives in a traditional farming village in the mountains, and he decides to leave his village to start discovering what lies beyond the horizon. It's a very surreal story. It is not at all realistic. Starting with the idea that he's never seen anything beyond his village, and when he gets to the mountain pass, he just discovers more mountains beyond and starts off on a journey. So his adventures are a little absurd and nonsensical. First, he comes across a city with skyscrapers where pigs are raised. He visits each floor, and every floor is a different stage of the pig's life and slaughter and processing. And other skyscrapers are places where maybe vegetables are cultivated or other things like that. It's presented in a very dystopian way. He also goes to a hotel where people sleep in sort of suspended cages. So it's kind of, absurd, as I said, and fairly dystopian. After that, he goes to a desert, and I was a little uncomfortable about that part, because there he comes into a village where the people were represented, I think, as people of color who hold him captive. I thought that was really weird, and not in a good way. The way that he's held captive by these villagers, and the way these villagers are represented as sort of like savages, or like less developed in some ways. I know it's a surrealist book, so it's not to be taken literally, yet I thought the representation was very inappropriate. My favorite parts were letters written to Bartholomé by the woman, I guess his wife, whom he left behind in the village. Those were more lyrical and they spoke to me a lot more. Overall, this was not my favorite book, but I was still happy to discover something new and different. The second book is The New Job and the Owl, two short stories by Anna Ruscha. The first one is about a young au pair who works for a few months for an Italian family. So she leaves Ticino to live with that family for a while and comes back again after Christmas. And the story is actually about abuse. I thought the subject was interesting, maybe not treated with a lot of depth, but Either way, I was quite attracted to it. And the second story was more about old age and intergenerational relationships. Now, I really liked the third book, In Foreign Lands, Trees Speak Arabic, by Usama al-Shamani. And this was translated from German. This was autofiction that reveals the experience of an Iraqi refugee in Switzerland. And he's living in a refuge, first of all. He's looking for jobs. He thinks about the brother he left behind in the country. And the narrator shares lots of observations about the new country, how people live, how they relate to each other, and the strange interest that Swiss people have in hiking, that to him is difficult to understand, but he tries to get a relationship with it. I thought it was a hopeful and generous story, and it helped me shift my view of Switzerland a bit. It helped me see it from a different perspective. So that was one of my favorites in the series just because it brought me something I didn't have before. The fourth book is Elvias House by Alexandre Min, and this was translated from Italian.
The City and Metropolitan lines, London Overground and National Rail services. The next station is Blackboard.
This again is more of an immigrant's perspective. It is the tale of a young Moroccan boy who comes to Switzerland with his mother, but his mother meets someone new and puts her son into the care of an older Swiss woman called Helvetia. The whole book is written in the form of short vignettes that render his everyday life, especially in his boyhood and teenage years. There are instances of racism, tensions between the two cultures he's a part of, that are represented by his mother versus the woman who takes care of him. And we see all the landmarks of a boy's early life and teenagehood. I found it touching, and it was also a book I quite liked, but not as much as the previous one. I think this one to me was very well written and very thoughtful, and it stood out in the series. The next one is Survivor by Julie Guinan. This was translated from French, and I believe it was written during lockdown. It's the story, an imaginary story of a woman who lives on her own in the countryside, and one day things start unraveling. It looks like something has happened outside and people have disappeared and nothing happens anymore. First, the electricity goes out, and then little by little she realizes that things have changed. And she tries to survive, but not in the way you would expect, where you go into full survival mode. Her response to the end of the world is to shelter in place for months, slowly weaving a life out of what remains around her. First using the food she has, then going to a nearby restaurant to get additional food, and only very slowly exploring beyond her immediate environment. It seemed really odd to me that she would wait so long before setting out in search of other human life. But otherwise, I thought the story was entertaining and kind of touching, and it was a fresh take on survival. This idea that maybe we wouldn't all be heroes, but we would just try to pretend nothing has happened for as long as we could, instead of confronting yourself with what's next. And that is tied to where she's at in her personal life history. Following a breakup, she's a little stuck and unable to move forward, and that's rendered really well by the story. Next, Blackboard by Romana Ganzoni was translated from Romansh, and it was also one that I really liked. It is another collection of short vignettes that seem to be autobiographical, and they're full of memories that take the reader on trains across valleys and to different countries as the narrator travels. Ganzoni really loves to play with words and languages, and she references fairy tales in her depictions of everyday life. I liked the playful approach to language and writing. I liked the autobiographical vibe of it. Personally, sometimes found it hard to relate with the fact that the narrator seems to be quite well off. Some things seemed a little disconnected from the way that I live, but despite all this, it was one of my favorites in these series, I think. I seem to gravitate towards the autobiographical somehow in my reading, and I'm not sure why that is, because I don't typically read that much memoir, but in this case I liked it. I think it was the fragmented style and the reflection that comes with it that drew me to both this and Usama al-Shamani. This one was also translated from Romansh, As If Nothing Were by Ruth Pluda. The narrator reflects on her son's early death. Her son had Down syndrome. It also seems to be autobiographical, and he died, I think, in his late teens. And so she remembers the different jobs he said he would want to practice when he grows up, and she imagines him as a soldier, a musician, a shepherd, and what his life would be. And outside, as she thinks about all this and lives her life, outside there is a maple tree that changes with the seasons and renews itself with each season. And so that acts as an anchoring symbol for how life endures and goes on. So this was a nice read as well. And finally, Tabea Steiner's Provinces, which is translated from German. These vignettes were like short personal essays, mostly centered around life in Zurich. Several of them also made reference to the 2020 lockdown, which for some reason I always find interesting when it's integrated into writing, be it fiction or non-fiction. And they just change topic entirely from one short essay to the next. So one is about Heidi, another one is about a kestrel that the author watches through a webcam. There's a lot of variation, but you do get a certain idea of what the narrator's life is in Zurich and various aspects of it. So that's it for this series. As I said, I loved these books because they gave me a new point of view of what contemporary writing is in Switzerland and got me to read new writers that I've never known before. I love also how beautiful and colorful the books are and how easy they are to take with you as you move around your life. They're very beautifully made. There's always like a big title like this. It just is very thoughtfully produced, and all of them have a slightly different style. So I think the design is great, the idea is great. Let me know if you enjoyed this video, because I can make more videos on some of these series, and I'd be really interested in finding poetry series as well, or maybe ordering several collections. or several pamphlets from one publisher and reading them together. It's kind of nice to serialize things. So let me know what you think about this, and put your comments in the chat to tell me if you would like to read any of these writers, or if you have any series that you enjoy. I look forward to seeing you again in the next video very soon. Bye!